Hey everyone, this is Erica Lucas, your host and founding member of VEST, an organization connecting women across industries, regions, and career levels so that together we can expedite the pipeline of more women in positions of power and influence. Welcome to another episode of the Vester podcast, where we explore the invisible barriers holding women back in the workplace and share stories of women building power collectively.
Think of care the way that anybody would think of care, but think of it as a continuum. Most likely people start thinking about care at the birth of their child and all the way through the death of their parent. And then what we also need to realize is that while care is a continuum and it's universal across the world, what we need in different stages are very different. I hate it when people say, oh, childcare. No. Care and childcare is this, right? Day one, you have a baby, you might need a night nurse, right? When that baby gets older and you outgrow the night nurse, you're looking for a daytime nanny. Then the baby's going to be able to go into daycare, right? So that looks different. Then they go into, primary school. And in the United States, school lets out in New York City at 2:40. I don't know whose job ends at 2:40 that they can go and run and pick up their kids at that hour, but sure, right? So you'll need after school care, right? And then as your kids grow old enough where they're no longer needing childcare in the traditional sense, they're needing stuff like tutoring. They're needing enrichment programs. And so that care looks really different as you move on, but that need for fundamental care sticks with you no matter what stage you are at. And even, as you parents transition to elder care, there is a good 15, 20 years before a elder parent needs to go into a home, but they still need some kind of care. They're no longer able to clean as well. They're no longer able to do the shopping or the errand running. And so a lot of, elderly parents would like to live in their home independently, but that doesn't mean that they don't need support to help them with the day-to-day or maybe even week to week, just to manage some of the day-to-day living that they need.
As proven by the COVID-19 pandemic, our economy relies heavily on a broken care system and unpaid caregiving, both of which have played a major role when it comes to the pay and wealth gap for women, keeping many women from fully participating in the labor force and minimizing our economy's potential. So why haven't we done anything about it? Join us as we talk to Yi-Hsian Godfrey, CEO and co-founder of Apiari, a company building the future of work for providers in the $648 billion care industry. To access our guest's full bio and for show notes, go to www.vesther.co/podcast. This recording was part of a more intimate coaching session with VEST members and has been repurposed to accommodate this episode.
So I will tell you our starting story of how we started. My co-founder, Ming, got together with us right after the birth of her second child. She spent 20 hours on care.com looking for part-time help while she was on maternity leave and found no one. She went through, thousands of resumes. She found 5 providers that she liked. She interviewed 2. And the first one said to her, I can definitely do the job, but can you make it Tuesdays and Thursdays instead of the days that you advertise for? And she was like, no, that's not going to work. And then the second person said, I'd love to work with your family, but I can only do full-time job and not part-time. And she's like, whoa, wait a minute. The job was specifically part-time with these hours. I don't need full-time help. And so she was sharing the story with us. And I was like, yeah, now that my kids are in grade school, I have 29 days of public school holidays that I'm constantly trying to help for. And that's forgetting, no after school, half days, and 2 months of summer vacation. And then our third friend said to us, who's now an investor in our company, said, well, my kids are now older, but now I just shifted all that time that I was looking for childcare right into elder care because my parents are now older. And we just sat there with 3 working moms, moment of silence. And I still remembered it. So it was almost like a moment of grief, of loss, because we all realized that we were never going to be finished with our caregiving roles. And then we saw this light bulb pop up, like every entrepreneur has that moment when we're like, you know what? If no one else is going to fix this, why not us? We know the problem so intimately that we can create a better solution for all working parents. And especially the three of us also had daughters that we were like, this is, where the buck has to stop. Like we have to fix this. Otherwise, we are just passing on this burden to the next generation of, ahead of us. So that was really how we started Apiari. And we named the company so because it was a nod to the bee colony. So when we were thinking about names for the company, we said, the bees really have it right? Because when they have a thriving hive, it's not one person, the queen bee, doing it all. She has a team of support, and these team members are all experts in what they do. And so when we dug into the bee colony, we realized there is like a nursing bee. There are bees that just stand at the door and all they do is guard the door. There's pollen collecting bees. And we realized, wow, you know what? We were the cook, the mother, we were the therapist, we were the gym expert. Like we were doing all those roles when we really should be thinking about how to delegate and how to allocate some of these responsibilities in a way that we can feel confident in outsourcing them and allowing us to do the things that we want to do and do them well.
Was, we raised a fund, we're raising a fund to invest in women-led companies that are specifically providing solutions like you are in the care economy. But often when we talk to people about the care economy, they look at us like deer with headlights, or under headlights. And they or they don't know what it means, like what all encompasses a care economy, or they automatically think that we're only talking about childcare. So in your own terms and definitions, how would you define the care economy?
I would say, think of care the way that anybody would think of care, but think of it as a continuum. Think of it as something that you would need from, most likely people start thinking about care at the birth of their child and all the way through the death of their parent. That, I think, is the way that we should be thinking about care. And then what we also need to realize is that while care is a continuum and it's universal across the world, what we need in different stages are very different, right? So even in childcare, I hate it when people say, oh, childcare. No. Care and childcare is this, right? Day one, you have a baby, you might need a night nurse, right? When that baby gets older and you outgrow the night nurse, you're looking for a daytime nanny. Then the baby's going to be able to go into daycare, right? So that looks different. Then they go into, primary school. And in the United States, school lets out in New York City at 2:40. I don't know whose job ends at 2:40 that they can go and run and pick up their kids at that hour, but sure, right? So you'll need after school care, right? And then as your kids grow old enough where they're no longer needing childcare in the traditional sense, they're needing stuff like tutoring. They're needing enrichment programs. And so that care looks really different as you move on, but that need for fundamental care sticks with you no matter what stage you are at. And even, as parents transition to elder care, there is a good, 15, 20 years before a elder parent needs to go into a home, but they still need some kind of care. They're no longer able to clean as well. They're no longer able to do the shopping or the errand running. And so a lot of, elderly parents would like to live in their home independently, but that doesn't mean that they don't need support to help them with the day-to-day or maybe even week to week, just to manage some of the day-to-day living that they need.
100%. And you started your company as a marketplace connecting parents or those seeking care with care providers. But now you've pivoted and really you're focusing now on supporting care givers. Talk to us a little bit about that and also help us define who all makes up the care ecosystem, right? Who are all the players?
I would say that when we first started, we were very much a marketplace for parents, and we still very much are, because that's where we understood and where we saw the biggest need. What we did differently is that we use a proprietary matching algorithm that allows parents to find providers fast and with confidence. So first, every provider that comes and joins our platform are 100% background checked, reference checked before they're put on the platform. And then our CTO, who was the founding CTO of Coffee Meets Bagel, built a matching algorithm for us to now match parents with providers based on availability, based on ages of children and experience, right? Like all the things that you would typically weed out as a parent yourself when you're going through thousands of profiles, we've done that for you. So instead of reviewing hundreds and thousands, you're looking at 10, 15 profiles at most. And then you can really see the difference in quality of people. And then it's really coming down to a personality fit that we leave up to the parents to choose. So that way, we're making it much faster for you to find trusted providers from the get-go. The recent, I think, evolution of our business is that what we realized in the past 2 years is that caregiving is such a lonely profession. Providers spend 55 hours looking for a job. They're constantly applying, right, with the same information over and over to different places. Then they have to go on to interviews. Oftentimes they tell us they don't hear back from clients that they interviewed. They travel 3 hours round trip to go for a 1 hour interview constantly, never hear anything back. And so what we realize is that we have to build a better platform for them, because ultimately providers is the foundation of caregiving. Without them, there is no ecosystem that we can rely on. So in our new business, we are, providing more of those services for them, helping them fill up gaps in their schedule so that they can make a full-time living, giving them resources like how to conduct a phone interview. You'll be surprised from a cultural and, experience perspective. A lot of them haven't ever been coached on how to conduct a phone interview, how to put their best foot forward. They are fantastic caregivers, but sometimes the communication aspect hasn't been taught to them, and that's really where their downfall is. So we're, coaching them on how to do phone interviews, how to do live interviews, how to manage client expectations. So I think those are all the things that would help providers feel more supported in this care ecosystem and encourage them to stay in this profession much longer, for the rest of us to be able to lean on them and support one another in this journey.
Absolutely. One of the things I often talk about is when we talk about the pay gap for women, the wealth gap for women, we have to talk about the bias. We have to talk about broken workspaces that really weren't designed with us in mind, and the bias that exists because of that, 100%. But a lot of that pay gap is actually due because of caregiving, because caregiving is automatically assigned to women. And whether we start having family or whether we start caring for elders in our family, whether it's parents or grandparents or whatever, that often forces us out of the workforce, right? Which then turns into a pay reduction and or a pay gap from the time we get out of the workforce, and then even when we rejoin, we've lost that those salary increases, those bonuses or whatever. So that compounds. Why do you think we haven't fixed that? And I also, a follow-up question to that, because I think it alludes to the problem. Part of it is the training that caregivers need, but also we've undervalued even paid givers, right? Never mind unpaid givers, but even paid givers, we pay them, not even minimum wage, living minimum wage. So I want you to talk about that. But first, why do you think for decades we've known that this is the case? Why haven't we fixed it?
There's so much to unpack there, Erica. So I'm going to try very succinctly as possible. For me, I really believe that first, let me just say that what I see is really encouraging on our platform is that there are as many male clients coming in looking for caregivers than there are female clients of ours. So what I'm starting to see is a more equal division of household responsibility between two genders, which I love. That gives me a lot of hope, because I feel like, if men take up more of the housework and child care and elder care, caregiving in general, it allows women to stay in the workforce. What happens is that I think regardless of gender, whoever decides to drop out of the workforce will see a reduction in their pay, and whoever stays out longer will end up doing more caregiving roles. And I think that's exactly what has happened over the decades, right? Because it typically was a woman's role. Women never, and then we reinforced it with our daughters, right? Girls, you have to learn how to cook. You have to learn how to make your bed. Boys, you have to go out and learn how to get a job, and because we reinforced those over the years, over generations, we kind of are a little bit guilty to feed into it. So I have hope that this is starting to evolve and change. But I do think the other issue is that in order to fix it, it's not a personal level. It's not an individual level. It's really a concerted effort on how we have to fix the ecosystem. And it can't be done with a coalition of working parents. I'm sorry. This is, we can make a lot of stinking noise, but we really do need support. So when you're talking about the ecosystem, there are the main players, families and providers, but there are what I call, supporting actors, right? And those are companies, governments, financial planners, situation types. And I'll go into a little bit of that in some examples. So let me give you a great example of how government support. In Singapore, there is a Working Mothers Child Relief. I don't know if you've heard of this program at all. I'm just taking a quick look. Okay, so in Singapore, if you are a working mother, 15% of your earned income is tax-free if you have one child. If you have two children, 20% of that of your tax is tax-free for your second child, 25% for third or more children, up to 100%, right? And of course, there's some details like if you are an Uber earner, then there's some caps. But in general, the government is basically saying, we know that you need the money to do child caring. So I'm not going to tax you for it. You're going to be able to use the money where you need to ensure that you have support so you can continue to work. The other thing that Singapore does, which I think is very interesting, is their food hawker. We've always heard about Singaporean markets and how great the food is, but the government actually caps several types of meals that food hawkers have to hold under a certain limit. So these are like, there are staples, fishball noodles, nasi lemak, chicken and rice dishes. They are not allowed to charge more than $2.70 Singaporean dollar. Let me translate that to US dollar. You pay $1.90 for a full meal and no more than that, right? So imagine if you're a working mom, you now have money in your pocket to spend for a care provider, or to put your kid into after school, hire that nanny. And when they leave, oh goodness, you start to feed your kids. Well, you know what? You can go to the market and pay $1.70 for, chicken and rice, a full meal, and feed the kids and be able to, work on their homework. And then you don't have to worry about cooking. You don't have to worry about shopping. You don't have to worry about cleaning up. Those are all the things that, from an ecosystem, from a support perspective, are there for Singaporean working moms. I don't see that in the US at all, right? So that's why I'm saying, working parents, we can, rally the flag all we want, but we do need some support from our supporting actors in this ecosystem in order for really to make change.
Absolutely. So policymakers, even employers, right? I know that some employers are looking at employee benefits because, they rely, everybody, if you talk to any employer across sizes, right? Whether you're talking to an established corporation or a startup, new startup, growth startup, they're all hurting and competing for talent. And there's already a talent shortage. So you see a lot more employers looking at benefits on how to support working parents, working caregivers. So I love that.
On the financial side, because I did mention financial companies, so I want to clarify that. So, and in companies, when I was at American Express, we had what we called the FSA, or, flexible spending account. And there was a certain portion called dependent care. So if you had dependents, you can defer up to $2,400 a year for dependent care. And that was tax-free. So I'm saying those policies, and $2,400 in New York City, let me just put some context again. Cost of childcare for infants in New York City for 1 year is $21,000. $2,400 tax-free in account is peanuts. It's nothing, right? So again, policymakers, financial institutions who are building these plans need to think a little bit more realistically on what the real cost of childcare is, and allow parents to offset some kind of cost some way, whether it's a tax-free benefit, whether it's, contributions by an employer to help offset. Here in England, if you have children between 3 and 4, you are given 30 hours of childcare for free. So those are some of the programs that they have in place to help offset the costs, right? I don't think anybody can take on the full cost of childcare. But, I think, again, government support companies, financial institutions who are coming up with these plans all need to kind of partake in some portion of it to help us ease the burden.
100%. When we talk about infrastructure and you talked about policymaker employers doing that, and we've talked about how some are doing it, why are we not doing or having these conversations at scale? Like, what needs to happen? What's the call to action?
Oh, I think we don't even have some of the fundamentals down. So to talk about childcare benefits almost feels like it's such a pipe dream, to be honest. And I'm talking about fundamentals like paid family leave. We can't even agree on that for companies in general, that to go anywhere beyond that, I think it's hard. And I think it's because we rely too much on what we consider free labor. I will share that as a female founder raising in the care economy space. I've had spoken to investors that are like, I don't understand the problem. My wife covered all that. Oh, okay. Sure. Mom, I'm sorry. We're not all fortunate enough to have a wife like yours. But, so I think just from a mentality perspective, people just feel like, oh, there's always someone to take care of this stuff. There's no problem. And so I think it is really hard when we can get some of the fundamentals and the basics down.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to your point that it can't just be parents touting this, right? We just need to figure out a way to influence rooms where people in positions of power and influence start contributing to the conversation and start seeing the problem first, seeing the barriers that exist, and then start investing on it.
Which is why I'm hopeful, because I do see more men coming on to do caregiving. So I'm hoping that this next generation will see this very differently than the past generations before us.
100%. 100%. I know this is not going to make you feel better, but in collaboration with even fund managers, as a fund manager that's raising a fund to invest in the care economy, I just had a conversation, and it was kind of unfortunate because I looked up to this potential LP as somebody that understands inequities and systemic barriers and all of that. And their response to me was, well, I don't think the care economy is as, the opportunity is as big as you say, because people haven't figured out how to make money with it. And I said, but that is the problem, right? We need to reinvent it. We need to reinvent how we're paying caregivers and providers. We need to reinvent how systems are contributing to the problem. All of that needs to be taken into consideration. But if we don't start talking about it, and if we don't start investing in the companies that are redefining those systems, then we're back to square one. So anyway, again, I'm not sure that will make you feel better, but I think there are, to your point, a lot more people talking about this, regardless of gender, regardless of situations. But I'm hopeful as well.
And I think when we're talking about caregiving, as a whole, it's easy to talk about it as a subject. But at the end of the day, we're talking about individuals. We're talking about families. We're talking about providers. And from an investor perspective, I can understand. I had one investor said, oof, people are messy. And I'm like, yeah, people are messy, but they're so fantastic, right? Like, that's what makes us so unique. But it's hard to design for variety of people, right, with different needs and different situations. And I think that's why it makes it so hard to solve for care economy, right? Because there isn't childcare for 3-year-olds, right? It's like, yes, childcare for 3-year-olds, sure. But then we think about, people who are working at Delta Airlines, they're doing the night shift. Where are they putting their kids? They don't need 9 to 5 help. They need coverage from like 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. Right. So, that starts to make care a little bit different, because you can't standardize for everybody, because everybody's situation is so unique and so different. And so for us, we really believe as a platform, we're trying to adjust for that situation. Like, there must be some provider out there that is willing to work 11 to 5 in the morning. Let me help you match up with a family who needs that, and at the right price point as well, to find each other faster. That's all we can do, right? It's to help enable and not to present a final solution of sorts.
100%. We have a question from Shannon on the chat. She says, your website focuses exclusively on childcare now. What is your plan, if any, for expanding to senior care?
Yeah, we love to expand into senior care. Senior care is very interesting if you think about it, because right now when we do childcare, Shannon, if you're the parent, I am serving you and your child, and you're all in one household. What we have realized, and we tested early with senior care, is that oftentimes it's the adult who is looking, it's the adult child that is hiring us to care for their elder parent. And the elder parent doesn't think they need help yet. So we're still trying to work out how that dynamic work in a little bit better sense. But we also realized that for us to build a platform first, we had to focus on a particular segment first. And for us, we believe, and like I said, care is a continuum. So for us, we decided early on in the company for us to focus it's with, newborns, and then aging with the children and aging with our adult parents into elder care a little bit later on, because it is pretty complex to solve for that. And then there is also Honor that is focusing exclusively on elder care. So we felt like that segment has been covered very well. And so for us, that gives it a little more time for us to think about how we want to present that in a way that represents who Apiari is.
Following to Shannon's question, she has multiple questions, so I'm just going to go in order. She says, it appears that you're focusing right now in New York. What is your plan to expand across the United States? These are investor questions, Shannon. I love them.
I love them too. So, we started off in New York City because, as I said, at the end of the day, even though we're a technology platform, we're matching people to people, and they have to, have a fit geographically. So that helped us. As we're moving into the future work platform for providers, we're releasing out new tools that will allow providers to not need us for the marketplace, but really just to help them manage their own clients. So right now, as a provider, if let's say you're a cleaner, you have all these clients, they're texting you left and right, canceling, rescheduling, can you come do this, can you that? You're spending more time on and off paper trying to figure out how to coordinate your schedule. So we're going to be releasing new tools that allows, let's say, the cleaner to be able to manage her own clients all digitally. Think of us as their back office assistant, right? You can say, here is my calendar. Book me whenever you like, because the system will know when I'm not available. So if you go into our system today and you try to book a night nurse for Monday at 9 p.m. and she's not available, you wouldn't be able to book her. You can go onto the system today. If you booked a night nanny and say, you know what, my baby's sleeping pretty well, we're going on vacation, I don't need you on these days, I can just cancel. And it removes everything from the calendar and it opens her calendar up for other clients. So all of a sudden, as a provider, I don't need to get involved. Everything is just up to date on the back end. And I just need to go and check the morning where I need to be, what I need to go, and I am all set. So we're having new tools that will allow us to not offer marketplace on the get-go, but at least enough tools for providers to be able to efficiently manage their work and their payments. And that will help us scale much faster across the country.
Another investor type question. Who are your biggest competitors, whether direct or indirect? And how have you chosen to distinguish yourself?
So I think from a marketplace perspective, Urban Sitter for childcare and Care.com are our two biggest competitors. What we do very differently is, one, I haven't seen anybody offer night nurses on their platform. So we're the only platform that offers a night nanny. And in case anybody doesn't know what a night nanny does, it's really after the birth of your child, they come in overnight to allow parents to get a good night's sleep. So they will, tend to the baby. Like if your baby's crying, they'll, you decide what you want to do. Like if you say, hey, I want to nurse the baby, when the baby's due to be fed, they'll bring the baby to you, you feed the baby, and then you're like, here you go. And then they will stay up with the baby however long it takes afterwards to change, burp, soothe the baby back to bed until the next morning when you're ready to take over. Typically, if you don't go through Apiari and you find a night nanny, they will want at least a 1 week or 2 week commitment. And at $300 a night, a lot of families don't have the ability to get nighttime help. But because our platform focuses on part-time, short-term, and occasional care, we're the only platform that you can book a single night nanny session. So for anybody with any social, economic level, if you just need one good night's sleep, and sometimes that's all you need, you can find it on our platform and fast. So that's one distinguished factor. Two, as I said, we have proprietary matching algorithms that really help providers find a better fit and families find a better fit as well. So what we're doing is we're constantly learning about families. And this is why we're starting at the newborn age. We get to know that you had a newborn at a certain age. We know that we age that child on our platform. So when you come back and you're looking for childcare again when the baby's 1, we're not matching you to the 3-week-old. We're matching you to your now 1-year-old. We're also learning about preferences about providers. So when they accept certain assignments and when they decline certain assignments, we understand why they didn't like a particular job or liked a particular job, and we adjusted in the back end so they show up higher for new jobs that they do well naturally, and they show up lower for jobs that they may not want, and vice versa for clients as well. So those are some of the things that we do a little bit better than our competitors, which makes it much faster for parents to find help, faster for them to book, and then for providers to really be able to accept jobs with confidence as they continue on our platform.
And this might have been me, so it might be a clarification question. Are you in New York or are you in London? I think I read in your bio.
Yes, I am personally in Bath, England. The company is still a New York City focused company at the moment with plans to expand US.
Okay, so the question then from Shannon is, what are the challenges being in London while the business is operational in New York?
I think there's not a lot of challenges, with modern technology, especially we're a tech company, we're a dispersed team as well. I think COVID has been great for a lot of folks, realizing that they don't need to sit side by side every day next to each other. Which is why we personally for me, my family decided to make a move home for my husband, because he hasn't seen his clients either for 2 years. I think the only challenge I think it has been interesting is that, I have to remember I am 5 hours ahead from New York. And so I just have to do mental math all the time to be like, okay, when is this call going to happen? All right, let me just readjust the time to make sure it's not obscenely early or obscenely late, one end or the other. But otherwise, there hasn't been really big challenges in running a business from overseas.
On the provider side, are there enough providers? And on pricing for providers, does it depend on the level of experience, education, or both? And how does this is a great question. How does licensing play into cost? So first question, I'll moderate for you. First question, are there enough providers?
Definitely. I think we see in the news that there's a shortage of providers. There is definitely not a shortage of providers. We get 800 applicants a month for joining our platform. We do not take everyone. And that goes to your second question on qualifications. For us, in order to join our platform, this is another reason why we're different from Care and Urban Sitter. You need to have at least 1 year of professional childcare experience, 5 years for a night nanny, in order for you to qualify onto our platform. And then we also need you to pass a background check and provide 2 professional references that we speak to personally before we switch you on. But I assure you there is no shortage of care providers. What we see is the lack of transparency between parents' scheduling needs and providers' scheduling need that I think causes the perception that people can't find help when they need it.
You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. That was a miscommunication on my end. I also thought that maybe, because you hear it so much, there's just not enough people working here.
And there's definitely some childcare deserts. So I don't want to ignore that. There are areas in the United States where there are childcare deserts where it's just hard to find. And I think that has nothing to do with people there's not enough providers. I think just from an infrastructure perspective, either the wages are too low or people are making too little money themselves. Like, how can they give away $1 when they need that dollar to pay rent, right? So I think there are some other issues in those areas that is causing the problems.
Thank you for pointing that out. Absolutely. And also, not only the pay, but traditionally societal norms have looked down upon caregivers, right? So it's not like similar to teachers, or not exactly the same, but we've not paid teachers enough. We haven't paid caregivers enough, and we also don't acknowledge the profession as additive as it really is. Okay, how does licensing play into cost? That's a great question, Sky.
Well, on our platform, all the providers choose their own hourly rate. We give them some guidance, and I think this is again how we as a platform can really support care providers. We give them an average rate, like here, based on your level of experience, your licensing or your certificate. Here's what the going rate is at, but you can set your rate to whatever you like, and you can change your rate whenever you want. And this I think what providers are really lacking is also enough data to make intelligent decisions on their own, right? Like so often, like I said, it's a lonely profession. Nothing is documented, nothing is shared. So they talk among their friends like, hey, how much are you charging? But what do you think you're going at? But they don't really have a grander view of what that should be. So we have enough, we have over 2,500 providers on our platform, and we have data about them. Right? We're saying, hey, the ones that are getting jobs are charging between 22.50 to 25 is sort of the sweet spot of like they just go fast. Like they come on, they get booked. So we give them some sense. And then we say, you can change your rates. Like what we always recommend for providers is come on, go at the average rate, get your bookings up, get your ratings up, and then you can start playing with your rates. You can then say, well, I'm getting demand. So just like supply and demand, if I don't have a lot of supply left in terms of my hours, I'm going to increase my rates. And those that really want to book me would pay me more for that. And so we're helping providers with that data point so that they can make an intelligent, informed decision about how they want to set their rate prices. And then in terms of licensing, they have to show us their certification in order for that portion to be added onto their profile. So it's not that I create a bunch of random certificates and I put it onto my profile. Like all of that has to be verified through our team to make sure that these are real certificates, and that gets added on that way.
And that's such a great question, Scott. And it goes back to our, who are all the players in the ecosystem. I wish our labor commissioner, Leslie Osborne, was in here. I know she's spoken to this group before, but she addressed this as part of one of the challenges. And one of the challenges is that it's my understanding, Yi-Hsian, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a universal. A lot of it has to be on state driven and even local driven. And so there's a lot of barriers and shift in policy that sometimes make it harder for people to even just understand.
Right. And
that was actually why I asked that. Thanks, Erica. I was just listening to something the other day on NPR. I'm in Washington, D.C., and that's something that they were bringing up was simply that they wanted to keep costs down and that licensing was so expensive that they basically were having to pay people more because of the requirements for licensing. And so that is exactly what I was curious about. But it sounds like what works really well in this is that the customer can choose, do I want someone licensed or not, which is one of the things that obviously differentiates between this kind of service and sending them to a facility that is required to have that. And therefore the cost has to be baked into that versus being able to make a choice as a consumer. So I think that's really great.
Yeah. And, when we started the company, because we were still building our technology, we had everybody on a flat rate of $25 an hour. We just thought it would just be easy. And it was easy. But then, like I said, people are complicated, right? And families were either looking for more experienced folks or cheaper providers because of their own budgetary needs. And thus we realized we were cutting off, a huge segment of providers, those that have more experience and want to charge more than 25, and those who had less experience who can charge less. And we were also penalizing families because we weren't giving them that choice. So when we were able to switch on that feature of, putting in your own price point, we saw a lot higher conversion because we finally were able to give family that choice. Be like, okay, today I'm going to be leaving the house. So I really want someone that's super experienced and I'm willing to pay $30 an hour for that peace of mind to leave my house today. Today I'm working at home. And I just needed someone to make sure the kids aren't going to set the kitchen on fire while I'm here on this call. I'm happy to pay someone $20, right? Because if anything does happen, I can be like, I'm really sorry, guys, gotta go, right? And I'm running downstairs. So now we've given parents flexibility, right? Now they're like, okay, I have flexibility in choice of provider, flexibility in what I pay the provider, and then flexibility in how I use and the type of providers I need. And I think that's really how we're thinking about the future of caregiving is, like I said, the beehive, right? Like we're going to have a go-to person for every type of situation we need. And so on our platform, you can build my team, over time, as you use different providers, if you like them, like them and they're added to your team. And then every time when you're looking for help, we check those calendars first before recommending new providers to you. So what we're really seeing is that one, families are no longer beholden to a particular provider where they're like, you can't make it today. Well, now my whole life, has collapsed because I don't have a nanny anymore. It's like, that's okay. I have, plan B, C, D, and E all lined up, and I can go into a platform and find them really quickly. And I've used them before. And that's really how we're seeing like how care is going to evolve in the future, is that it's going to be more fluid, more dynamic, more on demand, adjusting to situations, days of week, particular life stages. But having that consistent help is really what people are looking for as well.
I'd like to go back to the comment that you made about the lack of transparency between the providers and I worked as a nanny through college in New York, and that lack of transparency is just so real. And so I'm wondering how you learn from both the providers and the employers, clients, kind of after the fact about those hidden expectations and how you build those into your algorithms as well as data when there are a lot of those expectations that they don't want to self-reveal. Mm-hmm. So how do you build that in?
So for us, we ask for client and provider reviews of each other afterwards. So it's a way to understand a family better. So as different providers work with the same family, we start to understand that family's dynamic a little bit better than the first time you join our platform. We know nothing about you. They write certain notes about the kids, like this kid is high energy, right? So then what we're starting to learn is that they're probably going to need if they're looking for a new provider, they're going to need someone that is a little younger, being able to keep up with the kids, right? So those type of profiles will start serving up higher. Not that we exclude anybody, because we're giving the family still the choice, but we're going to say, hey, this is going to be a better fit for you, right? It's just like watching Netflix. All of a sudden you like one movie, then you're starting to see things very similar. It's like that kind of algorithm. Same thing for provider side. What we realize, when we ask families for reviews, when we interview providers, she's like, oh, I've worked with, children of all ages, from newborns all the way to 15-year-old. It's like, wow, that's a really wide range. And so what we learned is that, the parents with the 3 to 4-year-olds keep giving her 5 stars. And the parents with like the newborns are giving her like 3, 4 stars, right? So we're starting to see, she has a natural sweet spot. Like all people do, they have a sweet spot with kids. We start serving her higher up with families with 3 to 4-year-olds and putting her lower down for, families that are outside of that age range. Because one, we know that she's going to do exceptionally well with that family with the 3 to 4-year-old. And, we're giving her the opportunity to build that skill set, should families choose them for other age groups. So those are some of the ways that we're doing that. That's, behind the scene algorithm. But more poignantly, from a transparency perspective, I think even just understanding when a provider is available, sometimes it's so hard to tell. So on our platform, they have to maintain their calendar, and their availability is how we match them to families. So if you're not working on Saturdays, your profile will never show up for a family that is looking for Saturday help.
There's a follow-up question from Sky saying, are most providers women?
Yes, we still have, I would say, 95% women. We have male providers as well as members of the LGBTQ community, which I think is great too, especially for parents whose kids are who are self-identify that way. I think it's great to find care providers who can kind of help them through that transition. And the male providers are on the younger side. They're typically college kids or high school kids. So those are the age groups that we're seeing from the male providers.
What about providing care and support to families with kids or relatives who have special needs?
I'm so glad you asked. So one of the filters that we ask parents is, does your child have special needs? And then providers who have special needs experience are flagged, and then they are matched up. So they are brought up higher up based on that. And I think that is one area that we can deep dive in much further as we continue to build our platform. Because again, special needs is a wide range, and the type of experience that providers have all varies. So one of my personal wish lists is to kind of get into more granular on the specific experiences that they have with special need kids.
100%. And do you provide tutoring as well, or are you primarily focused on?
During the pandemic, we were doing something called Enrichment Leaders, which is still on our site. And those were more college educated providers that could help with setting up technology, for online classes, helping with homework. They also had, experience in teaching art and drama and music. So to that extent, we offered, but not traditional academic tutoring.
We've talked earlier about the need to have a broader set of people and stakeholders talking about the care economy and talking about this. And for the first time in decades, President Biden did earmark $400 million out of his infrastructure. And I love that they specifically put it under the infrastructure bill to go to the care economy. Can you tell us a little bit? Are you familiar with this? And can you tell us more about what that money is going to go towards?
I cannot tell you that because I don't sit at Biden's table. But what I do know is that, out of the money that he's allocated, it sounds like majority of the money is going to existing programs for elder care and disabled populations, is my understanding. I think the new part would be the $200 billion that he had earmarked for pre-K and other childcare. And those are really much facility buildings. So again, I think more universal pre-K, more towards the 3 to 4 year age group is my understanding of that Biden's plan.
Yeah. But to your point, we're not having the broader conversation as to, well, that's great from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. What happens after? What happens? So
that's right. What happens when your 8-year-old doesn't want to go to daycare anymore after school? I mean, like my 8-year-old was going to be like, oh, no way. Right. So I think, again, this is where people try to find a solution for a varied, multifaceted problem. So I think we have to be very creative in thinking about least common denominator, which is everybody needs care, and accept the fact that everybody's care needs are different. And I think it really does need to come down to individual ability and choice on how that works for your family. And for me personally, I always come down to, I think what families really need is really the financial support to be able to choose the right and best option for them.
Danae asked a question on the chat. Have you had any success partnering with employers to provide services to employees at some cost to the employer? For example, employees pays half, employer pays other half.
Yeah, we've had some great conversation with employers. I think they have really good intent. What they realize after speaking with us is, boy, childcare is expensive. So, we have a calculator that we send the companies like, hey, this is what like a 10%, contribution would look like. This is what 50% would look like. And once they figure out like the cost of childcare for regular care times the hourly rate times their contribution, they are just like, oh my goodness, we cannot afford childcare. So a lot of companies pay for memberships. So if you use Urban Sitter, as a family, you would pay $25, $30 a month to be a member of Urban Sitter. Companies pay for that membership, but the burden, I feel like, is still left on the parents when they're struggling to find care. Like they go into Urban Sitter and then they're like, okay, only 300 providers I have to go through to find help for tomorrow. They're like, forget it. I'm just going to take a day off. Right. Like, I think that is the problem that I think companies need to solve for. It's great that you're paying for that, but if the solution you're giving them requires them to take 5 hours of their day to find 4 hours of help that they need next day, like no one's going to be doing that. So I think a better solution needs to be put in place to find help fast when you need it, to find help with confidence, right? And to know that you can do the job that you need to do quickly.
What do you think I think this goes back to also paid family leave, right? One of the reasons why we haven't seen it enacted at scale is because of the cost. And who should pay for it, right? Should it be employers or should it be our government, or a combination of both? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we're one of the few countries, if not the only country, that doesn't have some sort of infrastructure when it comes to that. But what are your personal thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm a strong advocate for paid leave. And the reason why is that if companies are serious about bringing employees and retaining top talent, they have to make sure that their employees' families are taken care of. And the reason why paid leave is so important for me is that if I need to take time off to, let's say, care for my sick parent, if I'm paid during that time, I can use that money to find help who have experience in caring for my elderly parent. If I'm not paid for this, then I don't have that ability to outsource it. And then the burden is left on me, right? So it all comes down to the economics of it. Like, can I afford to outsource this responsibility that's given to me that's so important that I need to find someone that I can trust, that I can communicate with, that I have the confidence for, that has experience? That costs money. And if employers are not, or if I don't have to get paid for it, like, how am I going to afford that type of help? It's going to be left on me to do it all. So I think, paid leave is why it's so important, because then it helps parents, adults, children, to figure out how to outsource that responsibility if they need to.
Right. I think one of the arguments is, what if you're a startup or a small company? Like, where is the threshold to be able to provide, if you're still building your own business and your own infrastructure? And that's where the conversation then, how much can the government actually facilitate, and can it be a co-effort?
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I really do want to clarify. I do think that we all can be very creative in how we support families, and it's not always through giving money. Sometimes it's a tax break, right? So the government can do that. But other things, as people leaders, like, don't set meetings up on Monday at 9 a.m. Like, I need to drop my kids off, right? So even just offering flexibility for parents is amazing, right? Don't set meetings up at 3 p.m. or into the evenings. Don't do team build meetings after work hours, because parents are rushing off. So that kind of stuff, I think, doesn't cost any money. It's just being mindful that we are in a work culture where people have lives and responsibilities outside of work. And so I think having a flexible culture, I think having an open dialogue, communication, where employees should feel confident and comfortable going up to their leaders and say, hey, I've got a sick child situation. And that's that's where my headspace is at today. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to be 100% at work today. And to be okay with it. I remember when I was working in corporate, we had a huge meeting and someone said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it. My kids doing their playoff baseball game tomorrow. He will remember for the rest of his life that I wasn't at this game. None of you will remember that I was not at this meeting, right? Bravo, right? And it was a male leader, right? So we all need to be able to have that conversation with our leaders, with our organizations, but then also for people leaders to say, hey, let's have this. I'm giving you permission to have this conversation with me. And also being mindful about how we schedule events and meetings and so forth.
Onelia wants to know if any of your providers are able to speak other languages.
Yes. So we also note, so a lot of parents do want their kids to learn or keep up with the second language. So we do see a lot of requests, and where providers can't speak a second language, we noted in their profiles that also speaks, French, Spanish. I think we also have some Portuguese mixed in. So yes.
Fantastic. We always want to close, we don't want, obviously we want to create safe spaces to have these conversations, so that we can share what are the barriers that are prohibiting, particularly women, to reach more economic mobility. But we also want to do something about it, right? Not just talk about it. So let's close with if you could change our infrastructure, if there's 3 things that you could do to change it. What are they, and what is your call to action to us, as you said, business leaders, individual parents, caregivers? What's your call to action for us?
Yeah. So if there's three things I would change, let's see. One, I would definitely change the leave policy. I think our United States maternity and parental leave is way too short, and it causes too much stress on parents to figure out child giving in 3 months, 12 weeks, right? Like if you work for a great company in the US, you get 12 weeks of maternity leave, right? Like your baby's 3 months old. Babies are changing so much in the first year. Most European countries get a year, close to a year off, right? They're like really settling in with their baby, and they can confidently move the baby on. Like at 3 months, you're like, oh my God, I just figured out how to change the diaper correctly finally. And now I'm going back to work. Oh, goodness. So I really would like to advocate for a longer parental leave. And then also I would love to revamp our household employment tax issue. So that's something we didn't talk about, but, in order for providers to get the right benefits, the right, taxation, families should be, creating a household employment ID number. Are you guys all familiar with this, right? And then officially paying your nannies and cleaners taxes. That process is so burdensome, and not that anybody has ill intent, but nobody wants to do that. And so therefore we create the system of paying cash under the table, right? And now we as Apiari are trying to re-educate the providers and saying, hey, paying taxes while you can will help you in the long run for Social Security. Like I've seen so many nannies come to me in their like 60s and 70s, and they're like, I haven't saved anything. It's like, you didn't contribute. So part of what we're doing is also re-educating the set about how to plan for the financial future, right? How to really make this a viable living for them. So those are some of the things that I would advocate for. And I think, as anybody hiring nannies on or off the table, just making sure that you're paying, minimum wage is $15 an hour. They're still not making $15 an hour. So try to pay minimum wage, and also trying to remind them how to save for retirement.
If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review and subscribe to our podcast for future episodes. You can also join the conversation by becoming a VEST member. Go to www.vester.co and apply today.